Are you a parent navigating the complexities of co-parenting, family court, or even domestic violence? If you are looking for ways to help protect your children and build a strong and supportive community around you, then look no further. Gray Minds Think Alike is your go-to resource for everything related to the complexities of family life. Join us as we dive into thoughtful conversations with experts and explore practical tips and strategies for tackling the challenges of parenthood in the throes of adversity so that no parent feels alone and every child's safety is protected.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Gray Minds Think Alike. Today, we are talking with Sandy Ross, the president of California Protective Parents and the executive director of Family Court Awareness Month. Sandy has worked collaboratively across the nation to illuminate and address the most pressing child safety issues in child custody cases. With a master's degree in forensic psychology and a graduate certificate in child adolescent psychology, Sandy was instrumental in the passage of California's Piqui's law, and in 2023, she received the Los Angeles County Domestic Violence Council's Breaking Silence Survivor Activist Award for displaying a fierce spirit, resilience, courage, and leadership in helping to prevent and end domestic violence. Sandy is a survivor and the protective parent of a now adult child survivor. I spoke with Sandy numerous times about 3 years ago when she got billboards made of various children across the United States who died at the hands of a parent in a family court tragedy. I remember driving on the Florida Turnpike and seeing a giant picture of Giggs with a powerful quote that said, "Is this enough evidence, Judge?" And I will never forget seeing that. Hi, Sandy. Thanks for coming on and speaking with all of us. It's so nice to see you again.
Hi, Allie. Thank you so much for the invitation to join you in this critically important work that you're doing. I just hold you up in the highest regards. I don't know if I could even walk if my story was like yours, and let alone do the advocacy and the work that you're doing. I know that you were able to get Greyson's law passed in Florida. You're doing this. So just wanted to tell you how much I admire you and what you're doing. It's incredible.
Well, thank you. I always appreciate that.
Brought up the billboard. Yeah. Working on that project was phenomenal in one sense, to create the awareness of how serious this issue is in family court cases. But at the same time, it's just really devastating when you realize that you're working on a project that's real. These are lives, and we all need to get it together because we need to stop this.
Yes.
It's excruciating. And I'm considered
I thought
one
the billboards and specifically were very impactful. Like I said, when I saw that driving, just even though I knew it was there, I can only imagine what other people thought when they saw it.
Yeah, very similar to see that. Some people even grieved further because for some reason it made it even all the more real. So
for sure.
Anyway, that was an effective project, but it was a painful one, really painful one.
I can only imagine.
Painful reality.
I'd like to just start with just you telling our listeners just a little bit about your background, how you got started with California Protective Parents and all that good stuff.
So I came in contact with the court system in 2005, many years ago. It was a personal experience. And to try to summarize, I met someone who seemed to have the same goals and vision that I did and the same outlook on life, and was really funny and a smart professional. And we ended up in a relationship. I was at a point where I was at that last peak of having a family, like having a child, another child, and just having that family dream. So it started there, and we ended up having my daughter, and there were some red flags that I did not see. Maybe I didn't want to see when I look back in hindsight, right? And we had my daughter, then I started having people reach out to me, giving me gentle warnings to be careful. Within 9 months, we ended up in a family court case it just rocked our world. It was something that I could never could have imagined what would happen. And then I saw truths in the family court. Not saying that every professional in the family court system is bad. I think the way it's structured and set up, it's hard for really good professionals to get it right or make decisions that work. But I saw the flow, and I will tell you that that introduction to the family court system, thinking that if there was issues of safety involved, that it would be a no-brainer, that they would get it, protect. And that became the most bewildering experience. So it starts out with the co-parent being abusive and scary at times to going and then not being believed. So the institutional betrayal it adds a whole level of trauma. My case was considered a successful case. I did not end up in a situation that you have or so many other parents, mothers that I know of whose children were murdered. That is the worst possible outcome. That's what you're trying to prevent. I honestly, when I think about it and apply it to my own world, it literally takes my breath away. So that's not the outcome I had. It was one that I was concerned with, obviously. And the second outcome that you end up with is where a parent who alleges abuse, there's so much systemic bias when someone alleges abuse. Mostly from what I see in my advocacy work is with moms, but there are definitely dads that have where they're alleging abuse, and the system seems to work against them. So then what the second scenario that I see is that the children end up with the abusing parent, and the protecting parent is treated like they're doing something wrong for something that our natural instincts is to protect our children. And it's used against you. The harder you push to protect, the worse it gets, the outcomes. And then the third one is what I would say is the successful one in this context of what we're talking about. And that is that a protective parent actually ends up with the child, and the abusing parent ends up maybe on supervised visitation. And then it's still not the greatest, because I know from many of the children or the parents that I've supported over the years, and even my own situation, was that most often children will push against wanting to be with the parent who's abusing them. Sometimes they'll go with them to be safe. They figure it's safer, but most of the time, from my experience, they reject that parent. And then they're pushing back on those visits, and that child who's been abused can't even wrap their heads and their hearts around, why is this parent who's protecting me, who seems safe, why is she or he forcing me into a relationship? And you can't get into the court stuff and all of that. So that's the third. Those three scenarios are top of my mind and are types of cases that happen quite often. I'm sure there's
it's
other
a conundrum, right? So what do you do?
I guess that there is no flat 100% foolproof answer to what do you do, right? Because every case is different. Every case, it could have the same exact variables, the same background, the same situations. There could be, maybe there's domestic violence and it's a middle-class family. It's this, that. There's one little child. The same dynamics, the same situation, but who you end up with in the court system, who knows what, they'll come out with 10 different outcomes. So there's no reliability in the psychology with testing and evaluations. It's knowing that
no two people are alike. So you'll never have the same outcome because you don't know what each person is going to do.
So in examinations, in psychological examinations, different professionals should come up with the same outcome. Inter-rater reliability, it's called. I was having a blank spot there. But
yeah, no worries.
There's none. So what I tell survivors that reach out to me, I do provide support just as a peer support, just as a protective parent from the past. It's like, you have to take care of yourself first. I think the first thing you need to do is gain an understanding of what the system is. It's what I see is that there's this expectation that many experience that the system is going to help. It's so complex. That's not usually the case when there's abuse in a custody case, because the bias is monumental, as we know. So you need to understand and work within what the system is. not what you hope the system is or what you think it should be, because it doesn't work. What I find is that strong survivors with a strong voice that who have justifiable anger, that's not your friend. It's valid. It's almost like someone could have a knife in your back, and when they turn it, you're not supposed to say ouch. That seems to be a common experience, is that you need to, at least in the way that I've approached things, is to just stay calm, stay quiet. I was very lucky to have an attorney who was a real protector and a stand-up guy. So he was able to help with making sure that I was in line. But these are what I say to parents.
Staying quiet the best thing? Because I feel like for me, staying quiet would have been detrimental.
When I say staying quiet, I'm not saying, in certain regards, it's not like I wouldn't go in and say that you're supposed to do this, and when you engage the anger, and I wouldn't say stay quiet in most situations about what's happening, but there are times when you should. One, you need to tone it down, right? To be able to tone it down, you need to be taking care of yourself, or at least know what's going on. But here's a situation where I was told to stay quiet, and where I caution other parents. If your child is disclosing abuse and the system isn't getting it, and they're starting to look at you like you're coaching the child or you're an alienator, that's the worst label you can get, is being an alienator.
Right.
If the system is pushing back, and then there's documentation accumulating because you're saying you're protecting your child, or you're saying your child is at risk of abuse or has disclosed abuse. Unfortunately, I see it over and over, especially with child sexual abuse, is that if you keep pushing that issue and they're not believing, then you're going to lose your child.
How do you get them to believe if it's happening?
Even empirical data shows that most of the time if child sexual abuse comes up, the child ends up with the perpetrator of abuse. If alienation is used as a counter allegation, it depends. It's how do you protect them when they're being abused? There's no patent answer for that. Some say,
that's the sad part.
Some say that you should do it whatever you can to collect evidence. So abuses, like child sexual abuse, is done behind closed doors. And how do you get evidence? And even when you do get evidence, if you have a smart person who abuses sexually, they're not going to do things to leave evidence behind.
Sure.
So what happens, what I hear about, are parents who take their children in for examinations, forensic examinations even, and that's used against them, or doesn't make it in reports. I don't know, Allie, if I knew the answer, I think if anybody knew the actual answer, we'd change the system, how they handle these cases tomorrow. I'm of the belief that, and this is not giving legal advice, but I'm of the belief that parents who are suspecting their children are being abused, that they should be video recording. They don't without the child seeing that. They don't have to use those video recordings, but maybe it at least helps them with their own attorney if they're represented. But there are moments when a child will disclose that are pure moments. And I mean that it's like a no-brainer that something happened. Right. I had met with an expert, a former prosecutor, with a scenario with an abuse case, a sexual abuse case. And that prosecutor said I would have walked that guy to jail. But the system, even if you do catch good, and this is why some attorneys and advocates will say never record, because even if you do catch sound evidence, it still ends up being used against the protecting parent.
Crazy. I don't know what we're supposed to do.
My opinion, we need to start over.
Right. Yeah.
We need to separate these cases these very complex cases out of the normal track that they're in. There's so many things, that can go wrong because we're in a system that, most of this is protected because most of what happens is protected. There's not any real accountability. There's not, from what I could see, there's no numbers when things do go wrong. There are no numbers when things do go wrong of outcomes. So how could you fix something that you can't measure? There are predatory service providers that their business model is completely based on the family court system. That's their target audience, their target marketing. In a business, they market family courts with programs. Some of them are quite frankly frightening of what goes on. And there's no accountability or no oversight. Whatever sounds good seems to be implemented. I think we need to start over or have a new path to handle these complex cases. And honestly, I personally would not want to be a judge because I can't imagine that experience either. Trying to figure it out, even those who are really good, conscientious. I had interviewed an amazing judge, I think it was out of Michigan, and her concern was that something would happen on her time, on her watch, because it's really hard to unravel. But and she was fortunate because she had her law degree and a master's in social work. So she took a lot of continuing education, but still she was uneasy about making the right decision because total respect to attorneys. I wish I had my law degree, but their educational background and experience doesn't line up with these complicated issues.
I believe that if you're a judge for family court issues or a lawyer, it should be your duty to learn about domestic violence and different types of domestic violence so that you can make sure that the child's best interest is really what you're putting first, right? That's your job. Yet a lot of these judges get thrown in last minute, or like in my case, I had multiple judges in one weekend. I'm sure some of them weren't even in family court. They were just back from happy hour. They need to literally put these judges with some accountability to actually learn about what's going on, because if otherwise, they can't make the right decisions.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. They have to have, because these cases are in front of them, they have these people's hands or their lives. Right. They have these people's lives in their hands. And whenever I've had a job, I've done everything I could to be fully competent of that job.
Well, that's what you do. You get yourself as ready as possible.
Yep.
You wouldn't have a doctor operate on a patient that never did that surgery before or didn't know about that disease. You go through training, you go through school, you go through rounds, you go through years. That's just not the case in family court.
It's like having a general practitioner do heart surgery.
Yeah.
I totally would. So that's why I think that there should be a path to a court or a program that specifically is centered upon these types of cases. And in the meantime, I think there needs to be training on implicit, explicit bias. Maybe the system needs to set up where they have reporting modalities built into their IT systems where they can collect data on what's happening. And then another issue, another issue is the crosswalk between family court, children or dependency courts, and the criminal courts. That's a nightmare because it seems like things layer of one bad decision or a lack of understanding of what happens in one system affects the other system. And it's not, you're dealing with family court, and our type cases often roll between these systems. And that in itself is a problem. I go back to there needs to be a separate track. Parents who are committing crimes, because that's what it is, abuse of crime, should be held accountable at a higher level. But the system needs to figure out how to get to the truth of what's happening. That's another problem. I watched a documentary where a therapist, quote unquote, for a reunification program was asked, I think she did 50 weekend intensive camp programs over a couple years, 50 of them. And she was asked, how does she treat or something along this effect? What about sexual abuse cases? How many sexual abuse cases did she have? I think she said none. That happens in court. No, nobody's screening for that. Nobody's doing lethality assessments, or maybe definitely the majority of cases. I haven't seen a case yet, maybe one where a lethality assessment was done. But anyway, I can sit here and complain all day And that's not going to fix it today. But for the survivors in this is to understand the gauntlet of what you go through trying to protect a child in cases with abuse. And I think that the parents think that if social services gets involved, that's going to fix it. And unfortunately, most of the time it doesn't. But still, that bias carries over. If you're in a custody case, you've got a black mark on your head, right? Already, you're one of those. But I'm seeing some changes happening there and some trying to gain understanding. So I'll say that. But at least in California, I see one county interested in really learning and getting educated more.
Right.
But so what I've experienced and seen in a dependency or in a social services case, the caseworker in my own personal case said to me that if another call comes in, she was in person, that she would put my daughter in foster care. Keep in mind, my daughter is telling me things and I won't share exactly what that is because I feel like that's her story to tell one day. But she's telling me alarming things that social services should be involved. And because she said that, there was nothing that I can do.
How old was she at the time, your daughter?
She was just shy of 4.
Okay.
And
so
she was disclosing a lot of things that were alarming. And a false report was filed against me. The social worker came out and saw that nothing was going on, but her words were, I said, do you think that one parent could be driving all of this? Because all it really takes is one person with a high conflict or a vendetta to get you in the court system to drive insane amount of litigation and issues. So I said to her, don't you think that one person can drive all of this? She has no idea what I've done to try to calm things down. All she did was make an assumption. And she said, I get what's going on. She said, you are like 2 kids on a playground and he keeps pushing you. And it's your reaction that's hurting your child. And I was like, wow. So that's when she said that another call comes in that she will personally see to it that our child is removed and accuse my reaction of being emotionally abusive.
Let me just stop right there and interject, because for me, I did just the opposite and I still had the outcome. Anytime I was pushed and I let it, for Greyson's sake, roll off my shoulder, and Greyson never saw me exhibit because I ignored it. Even though I dealt with it on my own, I ignored as much as possible. I never wrote back. I never responded. And I literally did my best to just ignore it. And it still didn't work out in our favor.
Yeah. You know what? I didn't react either. I literally drove 2.5 hours every Tuesday from Los Angeles to San Diego to take a class in San Diego, 2.5 on the way there and 2.5 on the way back, to try to find ways to deal with this, to calm it down, to not react, even when it's justifiable. If you're human,
right? Yeah,
it's justifiable. But yeah, so she had no idea what I had invested in trying to calm things down. I'm not a conflictual person at all. I'm I would go around hugging trees and loving people all day if I could.
Yeah, I hear you. Nobody likes conflict.
Yeah, for sure. So just going back to the survivors dealing with it, is you have to understand what the system is and how to work within that framework. I would recommend highly to get involved with support groups.
Yes.
One Mom's Battle, for example, that is such a lifeline, and it's connecting with people who've been there and who understand it. And so I often refer people into that to get peer support.
We actually just had Tina on about 3 weeks ago. So yeah, we introduced her in the world of One Mom's Battle.
Awesome. I wish One Mom's Battle was around when I made the scene in 2005, because it was like crickets. And you asked me how I ended up.
You said the same thing.
Yeah, there was nobody. So I ended up calling and reaching out, and I found the woman, Connie Valentine, who founded California Protective Parents Association. And I told her what my experience was. And I still remember where I was standing in my front yard when she broke the news to me of what this is. And what's ironic about it is all these years later, I end up on the board and heavily involved in that organization.
That's as it should.
Yeah. So I get to give back. And that's another thing I would like to go down to, how to help survivors cope and give them tools and ideas. To go back to that list is understand the system, take care of yourself, meaning eat healthy. I did not, and forgive yourself if you're not graceful, because I definitely was not graceful at times with this, but you try to get exercise, keep you got to
take care of your health, because that affects your mental health.
Yeah. And you need to be ready. It's Navy SEALs level when you have a determined, calculated type.
Definitely.
Use of personality that you're dealing with, who will do anything to hurt you. They hate the parent more than they care about the child. And then the child becomes a tool.
100%. Right. Which is what happened with me. Greyson's father, his hate was greater than his love for Grey.
I don't even know if some of these guys could love. And I'll put women for the bad ones. I never want to. I know it's a gender issue with abuse, and it affects women disproportionate a lot more than men, but there are men that I don't want to exclude.
Absolutely. I've heard from fathers saying that Greyson's law saved their child's life. So it definitely goes both ways, and I will always say that. Now, I am just curious. I would like to know how you got involved with Piqui's Law and what it is and how it helps California.
Piqui's Law is definitely one of my proudest moments to be involved in. I'm friends with Anna Estevez, who is from the Los Angeles area, and she's also on the board of California Protective Parents Association. So we have a pretty close friendship. And a few years back, Piqui's resolution was introduced into the legislature by Assembly member Blanca Rubio, and it successfully went through, which was great. So it laid the framework. I was involved in that, doing call outs, trying to get people trying to educate on the issue to ensure that we start to get some groundwork done in California. Then Senator Susan Rubio introduced Piqui's Law. And so that was my personal mission, to really engage in that and to help coordinate, to help with the language part. I worked with survivors. I had a group of survivors that had experienced the reunifications program, and I wanted to really make sure that we were very thoughtful in what their experiences were, so that we included them on that, and that I could engage in feedback. Let me step back. So what the law, this was the second legislative session that it was introduced. The first time we didn't make it.
Right. Same with Greyson's.
Yeah. What advocates seem to lose sight of, that every state is different and states are going to battle over certain issues. So the intent was to have the components of Caden's Law in California. That was the intent. But through the negotiations and that process, we got a lot of pushback on certain areas. And there was no way that we weren't going to move forward and get something in place that actually made an impact with that process. And literally the whole world was watching. There were calls coming in from international on Piqui's Law and Team Piqui.
Can you tell us a little bit about that story, just briefly for our listeners, so we know how Piqui's Law came about?
Anna Estevez is Piqui's mom. She was in a divorce case with a really abusive personality that had a hidden life, all of the above, who's now in prison. It was heartbreaking. I'll never forget the first time seeing her on the steps at City Hall in downtown Los Angeles in a press conference, begging for people to come forward basically with information to say what was happening. So her child, Piqui, went missing. I can't remember the exact amount of days, but it was a few months. And the dad had taken the Piqui to Disneyland to give him his last hurrah, and ended up murdering him and tried to set up Anna for that murder. The police had found him next. Yeah, that you could tell what kind of mind that is. The police had found him by his car, and Piqui was was nowhere to be found. And long story short, after a few months, Anna got the most dreadful call, as you know what that call is about, that they found his body and he was propped up against a tree in the woods and just left there.
This was a few months, you said, after?
Yeah. So all that time.
So what was going on? Yeah. What was going on in between that time of Disney World or Disneyland till that day?
Dad was having the time of his life in Vegas, doing all kinds of stuff. And so they were investigating over that period of time. And I don't know.
What was the mom doing?
Looking, searching.
Just freaking out?
Anna just remained steadfast and keeping in front of the media, keep the message out.
Did she think he was just kidnapped?
It probably would be better to talk to her for the detail level because I don't want to get any of the facts wrong. But she always held hope that he was still alive and was engaged with so many people they did massive search parties.
So they were looking.
She was hugely engaged. She called the city of Los Angeles or emailed and made certain, I don't know if demands is the right word, but expectations on help. She called the worldwide to get support to find him and still remained having hope until that day when her hope was no longer. And it's heartbreaking. Her story really resonates with me because I feel like I knew her child just because I've been so engaged. And she's an amazing advocate, as you are, and trying to make a difference so other children don't have the same fate. So she's in Piqui's law. She's really pushing on the training on domestic violence. That's what we were able to at least get the topics where a training program has to be developed, and also reporting on the judges' participation. So the number of judges that went through the training, which is good information. I'd like to see it more detailed, but it's a start. And then the third component of the law, we had some challenges trying to get through all of the language that was in Caden's law. What we did do was highly effective in ending and banning reunification intensive treatments that have certain components: no contact, acutely distressing, no transportation orders, no overnight or multi-day or out-of-state stays. So we took the different tenets within reunification treatments, programs, or services to at least broaden the scope a little bit. And what is amazing to me is Maya and Sebastian, those children, the whole world saw that, what they went through, how some of these professionals that offer these programs, after seeing that, could think that the treatment was valid. Maya reported that they were called psychopaths or sociopaths. I've heard from other child survivors that they were told the abuse didn't happen.
Yeah. I did just hear that reunification was banned in about 5 states.
Yes. Yep.
So that's a small start.
It's a start. And it's just having advocates and states go after it. And tying this back to the survivor is advocacy. I started probably maybe 2007-ish. Early on in my case, I started small in ways that were behind the scenes because survivors have to be really careful in coming out. Many do. But I got my greatest joy when I was able to make a positive impact in any kind of way. So Family Court Awareness Month, as you know, Tina Swithin was the founder of that, and she came up with the idea. And I'm like, I'm in, because I thought it was a great program. And one of the greatest benefits for me personally, one of the most satisfying things is watching survivors run with this and get that feeling of, I'm heard. They hear me.
Exactly.
They see me. Because when you get a proclamation, it just feels so good. I had my city council member literally hand deliver it to me during COVID and say, this is one of the most important ones that we've done. You know, I had another mayor, after she gave it to me, hug me and say, this is so important. I'm a survivor too. I've had cities reach out and call me after I was presented to tell me, oh my gosh, here's what I'm going through. And then I had the same.
I actually accepted proclamation in about 5 or 6 cities locally for me. I know I did it in Fort Lauderdale, Plantation, Sunrise, Coral Springs, Weston. And I know for a few of them, the city councilman or the mayor of that city literally said, I am a victim of domestic violence as well. And we're so happy to hand me that proclamation.
Yeah. So
you never know how many people you're going to touch.
And if you can't be at the microphone and you can't have your face out there publicly because of the retaliation, behind the scenes is just as rewarding.
Sure.
Early on, I talked to survivors who were going through cases with individuals that had psychopathic personalities. That's where I started, because who does that? Who does that kind of behavior? There's something going on. But I started there, and it wasn't open publicly, but yet I had that feeling and connection and identification with another human being to let them know they're loved and I get it, So I would start there if you're still in a case, or you can do things to support the Family Court Awareness Month campaign in the background. You can look up cities and mayors and emails and work on a little team and help them out. It does feel good. Yep. It really
I've actually had parents reach out to me within the last week because they saw pictures I posted of the billboards that we were talking about earlier, asking if they're still up, if they can go drive by for something they're working on and how they can get involved in that and get one for their child. So I had to tell them this was already 2 or 3 years ago, but it was very impactful.
Yeah, it's incredible, but the feeling is good. You have to, when you're going through this, you just have to find ways to get experiences of joy somehow in between all the trauma.
Yeah. They say the 6th or whatever phase of grief is called making meaning, right? Doing meaningful things that will drive you to want to see another day. I know people ask me all the time how I even get out of bed in the morning. And I say, some days I don't, but the other days I do it because I don't want to give up any more power. And I don't want Greyson's father to see that he has any more control over me and that he didn't win. And I am going to get up and I am going to fight and I'm going to keep talking about it because I have to.
You're such a beacon for other parents, as all of those parents who haven't had to survive what you've survived, what Anna Estevez survived, what Kathy Sherlock survived, which Lee survived. It's awful. I could go through a whole list. You got to do a better job. These children didn't deserve that. And
Nope.
How do we prevent that? Even if it was one child, we should be looking at it. But we're talking about almost 1,000 children that were reported, in the media. But CJE had kept track of the numbers of stories reported.
Yep.
It's heartbreaking.
It is alarming.
Really
I know I went with CJE to DC last year to just try to get some people to meet with us to talk about child safety laws federally. Because even like Caden's law is federal, getting them passed in each state is not easy, which makes no sense.
It does to me it does after going through the process end to end. It makes total sense to me now. Like I see what the roadblocks are, and I think everyone is in it for themselves. Like all of the stakeholders, they're looking at how it will affect the groups that they represent. And they might not understand it because the adversaries of child safety laws, they have put out stories and created uncertainty and doubt and fear and parents' rights and all of this stuff. So I can see now, it's not an easy process. It's one that you need to have thick skin to get through and be effective at it. But it's worth it. I would tell you the most rewarding moment of all of my advocacy, there's so many. One of the most rewarding moments was that I had a Zoom call set up for the parents that were in that focus group, like trying to get information from them, their stories. And I got them on the Zoom. And the most amazing thing was to tell them that I just heard the governor sign the law. And they were sobbing. And I was, I could sob right now.
Yeah. I was worried that my governor was going to veto Greyson's law because we were just worried that it wouldn't pass, but he signed it.
Yeah, I saw that. I was rooting for you from across the country.
Yeah. So I guess what's next on the horizon for California protective parents?
Right now, we're working on several projects. We have a research survey on our website. It's at caprotectiveparents.org. It's right at the top. If you click on that, I encourage people to participate in all of the credible efforts to gather information about survivors' experiences in the family court system or in the other systems or on any particular category of abuse. The more information that we can present, the better. So that's one. We're day-to-day just supporting survivors, educational programs. We're right now planning a celebration of advocates and the hard work that they've done. We're always looking at ways to advance child safety and education through advocacy and research. And I quote the research because it's not, academic research, but it's information that we collect.
That all sounds great. Hopefully we'll do similar things here in Florida. I love always talking to people that represent other states to see what they're doing. We can try to align our initiatives, especially here in Florida. But yeah, I thank you so much for sharing all that with our listeners. It's been great to work with you and Tina, and I hope that I can do more continuously through my advocacy journey.
I'm sure that you will, Allie. You're just amazing. I thank you again for inviting me. I hope I made sense.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. And maybe I'll have you back on and we'll talk about some more things because we both know that it's a never ending topic.
It is indeed.
Thank you so much, Sandy. And I can't wait to talk further. And yeah, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
All right. Talk to you soon.
If there's someone that you want to hear from on this podcast, please feel free to send me an email. Or if you would like to be a guest, please reach out at Allie@Greyson'sChoice.org. If you would like to continue to hear our podcast, please consider donating at Greyson'sChoice.org. Any amount helps to fund our mission to help protect our children.